I believe trading James Harden's a pipe dream.
Even though he was also made available.
Correct.
Rhetorical.
Let's put him aside for a moment.
Yes.
To me, that's not logical. I don't think it's very plausible. Unless somebody knocks their socks off, they're going to the well at least for another year or two with James Harden. And I probably would as well if I'm the Rockets. Maybe I would.
Let me take a 30.
30, here we go.
Take a 30 here, BT.
Time out, Tiki.
If you're some other team, aren't you significantly more interested in James Harden, though, than anybody else on the Rockets? Certainly more than CP3.
Sure.
Or Capella because of the limited, the Tucker, et cetera. All those guys.
Gordon.
You're much more interested in James Harden, right? So why?
Well, I can't answer that without asking, what am I giving up? You like James Harden more than I do.
He's an MVP.
I've got a fundamental issue with him not showing up at the biggest points of the season.
True.
An indifference to shooting.
True.
That's not good.
Again.
That's a bit of a problem when you're trying to win a championship. Your best player doesn't like to shoot in the fourth quarter.
All right, go on.
That's not good.
Go on with your narrative.
Okay.
We'll suspend James Harden for now.
That's why I said put him over to the side. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to him.
Because he's more complicated than that.
To trade Chris Paul, and it's funny because the numbers came up on the show the other day. You and I talked about this. 38.5 next year.
It's a lot.
Not palatable. 41.3 the next year. Definitely not palatable. And what, for me, would be any deal killer, unless you're giving me everything, like 5 first-rounders down the road, which you wouldn't, $44.2 million, a player option when he will be entering the age of 38 during that season. The only way I can even have a conversation about acquiring Chris Paul is if you are going to also throw in Clint Capella, who I also, by the way, have reservations about.
Well, he also
horrendous
has a big
free throw shooter.
He also has a big deal, too, though.
It's only for 4 more years.
True.
And it tops out at $20.2 million. And for somebody who just turned 25 and is an uber athlete and has some real skill in terms of, around the basket stuff, I would at least entertain, if you want me to take Chris Paul off your hands, you better give me Capella and you better give me a first-rounder. Otherwise, I'm hanging up.
Who are the teams that would potentially do this? Because there's not a ton of them.
I don't think there's very many.
There's not a lot.
I don't.
You'd have to have an established star like LeBron James to pair with Chris Paul, who he knows a little bit, and it feels like their intersections of viability are about the same. Chris Paul's got maybe a couple years left of good basketball before he gets old. Not that he's been healthy enough to say he's not been old lately. And LeBron James is the same way. There's a couple of years of good basketball left.
But it seems like LeBron is just miles ahead of Chris Paul.
But what
slowing down.
What team could the Rockets go to that's going to say, yeah, Chris Paul fits exactly where we are in our development of players or our aging out of player, whatever it is, whichever side of the coin you're looking on. Who does it?
I got 2 for you. One I don't love, but it's just trying to match up some numbers. I would probably call Miami and at least have, even if it equates to. Yeah, go ahead.
But it's a lot of money to intake.
If you're Miami?
Yeah, if you're not going to win right now.
Well, but if it gets you out of Dragic's contract and Whiteside's contract, Whiteside's contract is not good. So, listen, any deal that includes Chris Paul, nobody's going to be both sides will lament a part of the deal. Yeah. I believe based out of necessity because he's a real depreciating asset. No disrespect to a future Hall of Famer. I don't want him anywhere near my Knicks. I mean, that tells you exactly how I feel about him at this stage of his career. Miami, although I don't think why would Miami do it? I don't know. But in terms of teams that might want to hit a little bit of a reset, even if it's a temporary respite from where they've been, maybe Miami, maybe. That's a long shot. Here's one that might not be. You ready? Celtics. What happens if Kyrie leaves? And we all think he's leaving. Who's your point guard?
Yeah, you don't have one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who's your starting point guard?
Yeah, and they're a team that feels like they're on the verge of pushing towards the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe to the NBA Finals.
Correct.
We have a veteran who's been there before, who's never had these kind of young, talented players around him, maybe he interacts with them better. That's a good suggestion. That's not one I would have thought of.
It's the first one that came to my mind.
I wouldn't have
Miami was actually
I wouldn't have
second.
thought of that one because I feel like the Celtics are got so many things to figure out, so many moving parts that Chris Paul thrown into the mix wouldn't have made sense. But it really does make sense because all of their players are young and they're not to pay them yet. And so
still impressionable,
exactly.
which Chris Paul you would think would be good with.
But the financial side, the financial viability matches up as well. Because you're not paying all these kids, $20 million a year.
That's correct.
Yet.
Horford's making big money. I want his contracts expire soon. Everybody else is relatively on the cheap here. The Celtics jumped out. I don't think there's really many other teams. Now, I'll throw one in there. I don't know if the new coach would have any interest. I don't know what they'd be willing to give up because to match salaries to make the trade work, you'd have to give up multiple pieces. What about the Suns? If you want to really excel, there's two ways to look at it.
You're right.
Who would acquire Chris Paul, who's on the threshold, theoretically, of a championship, or who views Chris Paul as a now guy, but also as a bridge to help accelerate the learning curve of a lot of young players?
I like the Celtics better.
I do, too.
I like the Celtics decision.
But I'm just throwing out a few options.
I agree. Here's the other thing. Let's back up to the Houston Rockets because this is where this story originated from. We had Tillman Fertitta on last week, BT, and he made it seem like, and I'm sure this is in all the other media venues that he's talked to over the last week or so, 2 weeks since the end of their season, we're going for it, right? We're going to build. We're going to try to find a way to get over this little hump that we're talking about. Why does it make sense for the Houston Rockets to tear down right now?
Because they're not good enough.
They're not good enough because they can't beat the Golden State Warriors. But if KD leaves and the Warriors become vulnerable, more vulnerable without the one or two best players in the league, doesn't that make sense for the Rockets to stay the course and keep trying?
I don't think so. Not if Chris Paul hits a wall next year, and he might. He might.
True, but I don't know. It just feels like they're pulling the ripcord too quick. Right? And it's odd that this comes out now. I don't know what the purpose of.
Well, think about this. There was also the report that while Mike D'Antoni will probably be back, it looks as if all of his assistants are going to be bounced.
Yeah.
So you've got that dynamic with the coaching staff. Listen, this has been, you and I sit in the same studio and we see this team that we talk about a lot very differently. I don't like them at all. I don't care what happens with the Warriors. Somebody else will do something this summer that pushes them in front of the Rockets. Yeah. And the Rockets have no wiggle room to add.
Yeah, unless they move.
Well, to add to Chris Paul and James Harden and Gordon and Capella and that dynamic.
I agree.
You can't do it.
But I feel like they're right there. They're so close. They're right there. And you're already committed to paying the money, right? But just one more year. I feel like that's the mentality that when we talk to Tillman Fertitta, that's what he was thinking about. Give me one more year to get this thing done. I don't know how they're going to do it, but he seems willing to go over the cap, obviously.
That's the least of their issues. The luxury, of course. But they got no wiggle room.
No, they're 30 over it already.
They got no wiggle room.
I remember looking at it last week. They're $31 million over it already, but it doesn't seem to matter to him. You know what I mean? And so
he wants to make it happen.
He wants to go all in. And if you're getting rid of James Harden, how can you?
We didn't say we're saying Harden's staying right now.
Or Chris Paul.
We're going back to James Harden?
Well, both. Either or. Because
to me, it's very different. Chris Paul is almost inconsequential to a championship.
But he did say, Daryl Morey said, all of these guys are on the table, including
that's what he said.
Including James Harden.
But I think that's smart.
But it just seems like he's on a different wavelength than his owner. Right, who wants to win it now, who has a good relationship, it seems like, with James Harden. He likes the team, how it's constructed, but he needs to do some things to make them a tick better. And if you're going to move a superstar, you got to have a better superstar come in. Is there any? And I don't think the answer is yes.
Then James Harden.
Yes.
Now, no, because you're not going to trade James Harden for Durant. You're not going to trade James Harden for, even though Giannis really needs to work on his shooting, Giannis and Kawhi's a free agent.
Right.
No, I mean, he's on the short list of superstars.
Right.
So you'll never get equal value. Can you get, listen.
Well, not equal value that's going to push you close to a championship.
No, but you might have something that's more sustainable. Like, I don't know that I'm just throwing names. I'd have to really check the finances, just something wacky. But to address it directly, like if I'm the Rockets, and by the way, the GM generally has more of a sense of reality than the owner, who's petulant and immersed in other projects. Daryl Morey does this for a living.
And he's emotional, and he really wants to win. And it's just like it's his baby. Whatever we got to do, we're going to get this thing done. Not actually knowing how to get it done.
Correct. But would I take Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and a future first-round pick for James Harden? Yeah, I would. Because, again, in my heart, if I'm the Rockets, again, you have to part of the problem, and this extends to every aspect of life, relationships, self-awareness and self-evaluation, honest self-evaluation, is very tricky for people because you get emotionally wrapped up. You just do. I remember when the Knicks drafted Gallinari.
Yep.
And I remember hitting a point in my mind where I'm like, ooh, I know he's good, but he's not quite as good as I hyped him up to be when he was first drafted. But you remain married to that conviction because it's a part of your soul that you're demonstrative.
No, I hear
you're emotionally married to it.
You're right.
You got to stop that. You got to divorce yourself of that and say, and if Morey does this and the owner does this, they'll come up with the same answer. Are we good enough to win a championship? Look in the mirror and find your answer.
Yeah.
Because the answer is no.
Yeah, and the perfect example of it is sitting right in front of us as we get ready to go into the NBA championship, the NBA Finals with the Toronto Raptors. What Masai Ujiri decided to do, which was hard. I mean, you can imagine how hard that was to get rid of DeMar DeRozan, who had been there for so long and been so many emotional moments with that team. And if we're going to get it done, we're going to get it. We're going to stay the course, as I'm espousing for the Rockets, which they're not going to do. Stay the course, right, and give it one more shot. LeBron's gone now, right? We have the East. It's ours for the taking. That's the one hurdle we couldn't get over. And Ujiri basically said, I need a better star.
Yep.
I need a better superstar. So he got rid of a very popular one.
An all-star.
Perennially, you're right. And brought in a better superstar.
As a rental, with no guarantees.
Exactly. And here they are in the NBA Finals.
Mm-hmm. So, I just feel like there's more that I don't know where the exact point of permeation is, if you will, but I feel like there's more and more teams that are willing to try radical things in the last couple of years. And I think the Toronto thing, again, don't look at it now when they're a day away from game one of the NBA Finals. To Tiki's point, view this through the prism of, man, they just traded away a guy, again, not a great three-point shooter, and the NBA at all, and the NBA's changing, clearly.
But beloved up there.
Drafted, developed, perennial all-star, love Toronto. Get lost. We're going to bring in a guy who might leave us in a year.
You're right.
That's pretty radical.
That is very radical.
I mean, so I couldn't wait to talk about this today. I can't wait to talk to our amazing listeners because I think that it comes down to three things. We'll get calls on this right away. 1-855-212-4CBS. For you to answer this, and you've heard our opinions already, where do you believe Chris Paul is, like in his, what remains of Chris Paul's basketball life? And you got to answer it honestly. Do you believe James Harden, regardless of almost who you surround him with, eventually will be the linchpin to a championship team? I don't. I also think Chris Paul is close to being finished, with all due respect.
13 years.
I mean, and a lot of miles and a lot of injuries, and he's, putting on weight. It sounds like I'm judging a supermodel, but I mean, he's getting thick. He's losing his balance. Not that he was ever above the rim, but he's getting a little thick. So how do you view those two? Once you answer that, you can call us and you can begin the process of sorting through, would you blow up the Rockets?